Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Public Square as we begin this brand new year. And as you pursue life, liberty, and happiness, we invite you to join us each week here on the Public Square and online, of course, thepublicsquare.com and aproundtable.org. Well, an important start to the new year now as Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan sit down for a very important dialogue. So welcome to the Public Square. Dave?
Let's start today's conversation with the Bible. It's a good way to start new year.
It's a good way to start.
And I was reading something that it just got all over me this morning. It's from the book of Galatians. Now, with Dr. Allen's instruction and tutelage, I'm grateful that once he started to be my professor, he permitted me to academically stalk him.
Do we need to have laws against that? Do we need
I'm
to
bad at it. I really am. Teach me.
Don't we all need people like that in our lives, though, that give us permission to pick their brain, to talk to them, to rely? I mean, it's old school mentorship, is it not?
Well, a guy of this caliber in regards to the history of our country and the prominence of his scholarship, who has been willing to invest first in me as a student and then come on board here as a trustee to this organization. And out of that, the benefit flows that now our library is named the William B. Allen Library. And all that has flowed from that, it is a gift beyond imagination. And I know it had to come from God because
we're not that good.
No, we're not that good, which leads me right to this passage from Galatians. Now, the reason I bring up Dr. Allen is because I asked him a while ago, Doc, help me out. What do you think I should be studying in the Bible? Give us some thought and then tell me. I mean, I really like your advice. And he got back to me. He said, I think you should study the determination of Paul.
That's fascinating. Well, and people should know Dr. Allen is an ordained minister as well, as in addition to holding PhDs and being able to read and write
multiple languages and
languages.
Translate Montesquieu.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
He's an ordained minister as well. That's a scary thing to ask someone. Tell me what part of the Bible I should be studying.
I've asked only a couple of people in my life if I ever asked that question.
It almost says, "Tell me what you think about me." There's a sense of, what if he had said something weird, like Song of Solomon or something?
We go a lot of directions there, couldn't we?
Like, what are you trying to tell me?
And you know what though? That was he knew that was exactly what I was asking him.
Yeah.
And he came back and said the determination of Paul. Now I knew not to ask him, "How do you do that?" Because he would say,
in the original Greek.
So what I decided to do was to go back and to read the letters of Paul in the order in which they were written, chronologically.
That's cool.
So that I could track the progression of his ministry as he moved from community to community in real time and space, in real human relationships. And then ask the Holy Spirit to open my mind so that I could try to get behind Paul's eyes as a historian and read these words.
Because these are the earliest books written of our New Testament.
And they're experiential. These are, and it has been, it's now 2 years of a study, and I'm only to the book of Galatians, which means I'm not even halfway through the study.
And they're not long books either. No. You're taking your time.
You can read these books in minutes. The problem is you can get hung on a phrase for a week in the study. So Galatians is an interesting book. Now, this is an amazing book on Paul as far as the determination, because Paul ran into a congregation that he had helped develop the first origins of faith and the pure redemption of the gospel of Christ. And they fell off the log. They went back from by grace you are saved through faith. This is not of yourself. It is the gift of God, lest any man should boast. And now suddenly they were caught up in religious practices and traditions, and they were amalgamating or merging, if you would, old school Judaism and the revelation of Christ in Christianity. And they were missing the mark.
Yeah, because that was a big discussion back then. Do you have to become a Jew to also be a Christian if you were a Gentile convert?
Fair question.
Sure.
And so they're wrestling with all this, and they've gotten off on a deep end. And Paul starts out with like 3 verses of grace and peace, and then he literally knocks their heads off. I mean, he comes out swinging in this book at a level that I don't think there's any other book. Now, this was Martin Luther's book, by the way. This is the book that turned Martin Luther into Martin Luther. Right? It turned him toward justification by faith. It turned him into a Christian. It was the doctrine herein. So this was Luther's. Well, Paul is like, he says stuff in here I can't say on radio. If you really translate it, he was so upset with these folks. So as far as his determination goes, this is pretty good. But I want to start at the 6th chapter of Galatians because he's calmed down again. He got the message out. And here's what he says. I'm going to read starting with the first verse. Brethren, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks himself to be something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. Refer back to our conversation a few minutes ago. All right? We don't know what we don't know. But Paul goes on, but let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone, and not in another, for each one shall bear his own load. Now, this almost seems contradictory. Verse 2, he says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But then in the end, he says, for each one shall bear his own load. But let each one examine his own work, and then he will have rejoicing in himself alone and not in another. Now, why do I want to start here? Because I can remember way back when we just got started in this work, meeting with some political leaders who were state lawmakers who were also Christians. Now, I would say they were Christians and state lawmakers. I think that they were Christians first and lawmakers second. But they were also very politically savvy, and I don't say that necessarily as a compliment. And one of the things they tried to explain to me was, kid, now I'm 30 years old. And they're saying, kid, it's kind of one of those, kid, arm around the shoulder, you got to find your place in the line. Then you got to get in the room. That's the key to how politics in America works. Find your place in the line, then get in the room. Because if you're not in the room, you don't matter.
In the room where it happens.
They preceded Hamilton by a few decades. Well, they were like up here and I was down here. And so I tried to evaluate that. Something about it seemed a little creepy to me, but I wanted to play in that and think it through for a while. What Paul is saying here is, you got to help each other. But in the end, you got to know your job and you got to do your job. Each of you has a job to do. Do your job. Do your job.
And he says you can feel good about doing your job.
You should feel, yeah. But in the end, it's not about what's going on all around you. It's about what you're called to do, specifically what you are called to do.
I find that's difficult in an age of social media and media saturation, the 24-hour news cycle. If there's something bigger than a 24-hour news cycle, we need to coin that term, because the 24-hour news cycle has been around a long time. What is it for when the news you're just drowning
the
in
microsecond news cycle?
Yes. And you kind of feel like you have to care about every single thing equally and be an expert on foreign policy, fiscal policy, every single thing. Just as a regular citizen, you feel like I have to, another new thing. What do I think about that? I probably need to tweet something about it. So there's just this overwhelming sense of I gotta know everything. I gotta do everything, do something about. We didn't always know what was happening at a nanosecond across the globe.
We needed a newspaper to come out the next day to tell us, or watch the evening news.
Yes, and so you can kind of feel like you start to drift, like, what am I even supposed to be doing? What is my job?
First time I heard this articulated was when Dick Cheney was vice president of the United States. Again, a lot of times in our careers, we get invited to stuff and we go, how did we get there? Why are we in the room? And Cheney made the same comment. He said, when I was a member of Congress, we had to wait till the next day to get the news. Then it was wait that evening to get the news. Now the news comes to me in seconds.
Yeah, and this was a long time ago.
Yeah, this was a long time ago. We're talking about Bush-Cheney 1.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how long ago this has been going on. So it's only gotten more and more and more accelerated. Now, Paul also talks in Galatians about you got to watch out how you treat each other. Because if all you do is bounce off of each other and compare each other and get jealous over each other, and you don't know your place in the line, then you're going to bite and devour each other. You're going to eat each other alive if you don't learn how to conduct yourself in right relationships. Well, here's one of the platform or foundational pieces of that. Know what God's called you to do. So I think it makes sense in the season that our country is in right now to just take a minute, because we're going to spend the next 4 years in some amazing debates that we would confess out loud for people who do pay attention to this program, and they do. And there are thousands of them for which we thank God. We have a responsibility, first to God and then to everyone, not to make people happy. See, that's not our role. We are not entertainers. We do not come to people from a platform of a network that sells advertising for the purpose of clickbait views and selling merchandise so that we have to entertain you and keep you watching or keep you listening. That's not what we do. We are missionaries in the arena of public policy, and we come there based upon a platform of truth. Truth comes first. Truth precedes power. Truth precedes culture. Truth precedes everything. Truth comes first. Now, at that point in time, people start getting up and walking out of the room because it's scary. It's frightening. Now, we don't come as moralizers. We don't come selling tradition. We don't come selling ceremony. We don't come in that perspective. We come saying, here's what we've discovered. But don't stop with us, because we are corrupt dust. When Paul says you think you're something but you're nothing, we know we're zeros. We know that. We know we are zeros. We have no value added from ourselves. The only thing that matters is if we catch the truth and we're able to share it.
And we know there's true truth. There's not our own version of the truth. I think we've seen a generation raised to think, well, you can have your own truth. And that's not accurate at all.
Right? We're not smarter than anybody else. So our moral authority isn't a platform of we know something you don't know. That's not us. And we're not coming at this from pedigree. We're not coming at this from wealth. We're not coming at this from having brokered angles in politics. If you don't listen to us, our constituency is not going to support you. Therefore, you will listen to us. Heck with that.
Yeah, and if you know something we don't know, please tell us.
Do you know we've been in business as in service, really? We've been in service for 45 years as a public policy organization, and we have never attempted to capture a membership. Well, how many people do you represent? We don't represent anybody out here. We're here to talk about the truth. Well, what's your constituency? We've never calculated one. Well, how do you attempt to have any power or leverage in the process? We don't. We're in the process to do some truth-telling. Yeah, that's where we start.
And that's where this program begins today here on the Public Square. Thanks for listening, by the way, and I hope you're making it a habit to pass these programs on to friends and family and let them know it's on the radio and online at thepublicsquare.com. All right, the guys will turn to an item in the news coming up on the Public Square.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square. Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
So glad you've taken the time to listen to this week's edition of the Public Square as we begin the new year. I'm Wayne Shepard, and today you're hearing the voices of Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan. Let's return to the studio at the American Mission Center.
So let's take a minute and talk about a story that came out, and this is a perfect example for the setup that we just did about trying to tell truth when no one else is looking. Over the holiday, a story popped up. How it got to the Associated Press, I would love to find out. But once it gets to the AP, of course, it has the potential of going to hundreds and hundreds of media outlets all over the country, because that's what the AP exists for. People don't realize the Associated Press began as a nonprofit. Now, today I would continue to say it's a nonprofit, but it is a subsidiary of the funding base of the foundations that now fund directly its stories and, I believe, shape and color and influence all of the decisions that the Associated Press now makes. And I think that if you study the Associated Press long enough and you have a depth of history, you go back and look at them 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, something has happened and it's no more manifest than on the issue of abortion.
Well, and you've had firsthand experience in closed door interview sessions, talking with reporters and giving them full hour-long interviews where you lay out facts and they, don't report them.
They're the ones who are asking for the interview to start with.
Right, exactly. Yeah, you're not hounding them. They're coming after you and then they don't want to hear it.
How things have changed in the media and in reporting. I can remember when I started at the Roundtable in 2003, I think about those early years, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, and gambling was an issue that was heavily discussed in the state of Ohio. We used to have reporters that spent hours, even days with us trying to get an understanding of it and do the research and do the homework, and they'd put out the piece. Now, with people just throwing stuff on social media that doesn't have to be always true, it's been a challenge to work to educate those members of the media, be like, hey, no, that's not accurate, and here's why.
The new formula for most news stories, and Associated Press is not immune to this, they're not as bad as others, but is for someone to get a lead and then give you 6 different social media quotes. And then this is what the Associated Press is famous for. Find some totally obscure, unknown academic at some university who decides that is going to comment on this, and then suddenly they're made into an instant expert. They are the masters of that technique. Yeah. Well, here's a story that managed to make its way to ABC News as well. Arizona governor wants to repeal the state law requiring an annual abortion report. Goes on to talk about Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs is calling for legislators to repeal the state law that requires an annual abortion report, saying that it infringes on patients' privacy, which echoes other Democratic officials' push to reduce or eliminate such requirements. Now, that's paragraph 1. If you go the whole way to the end of the story, you get the bottom line. And this is a bottom line that is stunning, because in this article, which basically emerged and then disappeared, I'm not even sure if you go back now, we've all got to screen say this, that you'll be able to find it in weeks and months ahead. This article was technically a mistake, because it shouldn't have gotten out there, so I expect it to disappear. Now,
we need to be screen grabbing.
What does this reveal? What it reveals is, first off, where the brain trust of the abortion industry is coming, where it's flowing from. And it's flowing from a handful of academics. That's first off. Yeah. Now, understand, what we would construct here is that there is an industry, the abortion industry. And I got to tell a story, okay? And we've got to plug a product. This is a free product right here, Abortion in America. It's a 60-page booklet that you can get, and it's still available. You can get it online. You can get a print copy.
And the online version has a lot of ancillary products,
additional data,
different things, different links you can click on. Yeah,
APRoundtable.org. Look for Abortion in America. It's that simple. And this is a very important piece. I was talking to a lawyer the other day, and he said to me, we got into this conversation about abortion recently, and I realized that my dad is 50 years old. I said, let me introduce you to a product. All right, here it is. It's free. It's a research paper, and it took us a year to produce this information. And there's not a single pro-life citation in this piece.
No.
All the data has come from the facts that have been reported for years by the abortion industry. Now, 50 years ago, the abortion industry did not exist. Barely existed. In the 50 years of Roe versus Wade, this industry has become a mega industry. They have built up facilities and resources and foundational support and billions of dollars of support. They have bought and owned and operated media sources. They are a juggernaut. They are the abortion industrial complex. They are tapping into state budgets, county budgets, and federal budgets at all different levels. They are a machine. And they exist to now to basically dominate this place in culture.
They are a machine, and they have some of the largest tech companies who filter out some of the things that they want their users to see. When we talk about Google and other things. So they are a machine, and they have a lot of help in getting their information out, but also limiting.
They own big tech.
Yes. We know that from trying to publish, trying to get that out.
I'm gonna. Yes, this was banned. This This was banned on Google. Do you think that one of the reasons they're talking about this is because of this piece? I don't want, I mean, we opened it and say, hey, with our Bible passage, don't think of yourselves,
more highly than you ought. That's Romans 12.
Sure,
We're zeros. We know that. We're zeros.
Do you think people saw this piece? Because it doesn't have any pro-life stuff in it. It's all their material. There's we quote the Guttmacher Institute in here repeatedly. There's a quote in this article from them that says it's really worth thinking carefully about the risk and the benefit of collecting data in this new environment. They're saying they're going to stop doing the thing they do.
Because we're on to them.
That's creepy.
And I don't just mean we, I mean the whole world.
The word is getting out.
Coming out on them saying, wait a second, let's look underneath all of this.
Yeah, and as you look underneath all that, there are other medical procedures, that's what they would say abortion is, they'd call it a medical procedure, that are done, but every medical procedure that is done, you know exactly the age of the patient. You don't know their name, you don't know who they are or where they live, but you have their data. You have, 52-year-old male, blah, 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 all the history of it. They want to take that away.
You need to track that kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, it's beneficial.
For scientific purposes. And they make it clear in this article, if you read far enough down, that no one's name is attached to it, no one's address is attached to this, no one's social security number is attached to this information. It's just demographic information. That they collect more, Google collects more than that on our search results.
Let's put ourselves in their shoes now. We're management, big player management for the abortion industry. Let's say we're the people that interface with Warren Buffett, who gives billions of dollars to have abortion procedures done. All right, we're sitting with the Soros community and the rest of the billionaires that make up all of this. And we're sitting with the academic and the intellectuals who are completely captured by the Margaret Sanger philosophy of population control to this very day.
Which, that's outdated, folks. That's an outdated philosophy.
Mm-hmm. So there they are. They want to do their thing, and it's about their money and about their industry. And now we've got this and look, here's what they've got to look at. They were 7-0, 8-0 until the 2024 election. Everywhere that they were involved in a state ballot issue, they had won because of the momentum of the misinformation campaign post-Dobbs, saying that the world's going to come to an end and all women's rights are going to stop because of what the Supreme Court did, which was nothing but unmitigated balderdash. That's absolutely not true, but they played it to the hilt. It was a carnival event. It was like a county fair, and they played it, and the music, and it was just junk. But they got away with it until 2024. And they lost 3 times in 2024. They won some. But it's kind of like a prize fighter. All of a sudden, the prize fighter got hit. He didn't just get hit, he got cut. He didn't just get hit and cut. He got knocked down. They got back up. They're nowhere near out of the game. The fight's not even in round 3. But they got hit. You know what they discovered? Information is dangerous.
The truth?
Now, let's go back to something. Roll back tape 2023, Ohio.
Do we have to?
It was that defeat that led to this research in abortion in America. But there's something else about that hasn't been talked about. We did a project in 2023 called See the Language. We focused exclusively on the language of an Ohio amendment that came from this brain trust that we're talking about. It is an abomination in regards to legal construction. Forget your position on abortion or any other political reality. This amendment is a piece of trash. It has no business being in any constitution. It doesn't belong as a prize in a Cracker Jack box. It's a disaster. But they put it together for reasons and purposes, and then they sold a perpetual lie. And what they did is they put that piece together, then they found an exceptional case that was sympathetic. They blew that up way past any point of reality about a woman who lost a child and the constraints that she went through to go through that process, blamed it on Ohio law, which was completely inaccurate and fallacy, and they sold the lie, and they passed the amendment. We said, see the language, read the language, watch what they're doing in the language. Forget all the carnival show. Look at the words and what do those words mean. Over 4 million people participated in some way with that See the Language project. They know if we get people to look at what they're actually doing, not over here at the carnival show, that people are going to rethink this process. I think you're right, Alan. I think they know that the facts are against them and the truth is catching up with them. And they don't have a plan B.
No pun intended.
No pun intended.
Dave and Alan and Rob will continue their conversation coming up on the Public Square, but let me repeat what Dave said a few moments ago about the book Abortion in America, this study that's been released by the American Policy Roundtable. It is available in print and online at aproundtable.org, aproundtable.org. Look for Abortion in America. More coming up on the Public Square. Anytime you miss the Public Square on the radio in all its forms, you can listen online at thepublicsquare.com. Bookmark that link and use it often, thepublicsquare.com, and also use our smartphone app to listen anytime. It's free. It's called The Public Square. Now back to today's topic. Here's Alan.
Okay, so we're talking about folks that want to not gather and report on information about abortions.
In the name of privacy.
Sure. I understand why people wouldn't want their names attached to these things,
Right.
but that's not even, they admit in this article, no names are no one wants names attached to it.
It's already illegal to disclose medical information under HIPAA, so it's not even necessary.
Perfect.
But let's not confuse the issue with the facts.
Sure. I'd like to make the case that this is actually going to be, if this happens in Arizona and other states, this would actually be harmful to women. And the reason that I say that is because we did a study a number of years ago, and people can find this at thepublicsquare.com. We did a conversation, we did some research on Kermit Gosnell, the abortion doctor working in Philadelphia, essentially performing, he's in prison now.
This was during the period of Roe versus Wade.
Yes, many years ago. He worked for decades doing abortions that other people wouldn't even do, very late-term abortions. His office was just pure squalor. The people were retching when they finally raided his office because people were dying. People were dying in this office. Horrible tragedies. Finally, people came in. There were cats everywhere, cat feces. It was
illegal drugs.
It was not a medically safe place. And one of the things that happened was people were hesitant to check up on anything pertaining to the abortion industry because they would be viewed as some sort of pro-life activist. They didn't want to be viewed as that. So they didn't check up on him.
State of Pennsylvania and the county failed to do their job on regulating a medical facility.
Specifically because they were afraid to look into an abortion provider.
Yeah.
And so I think essentially you can hide in the darkness. You want to shine a light on this industry. Even if you were a fan of the industry, you should want a light shined on it because women can be harmed. Women were dying because this guy was bad at his job and no one checked up on it.
They were dying, and they were dying in communities at a higher rate on which the abortion industry says they're out to protect.
Yeah.
Gosnell's office was in
downtown Philadelphia,
inner city Philadelphia, in a poverty-stricken neighborhood. And the abortion industry always says those are the women and the families they're looking out for. Yet they turned a blind eye as those women were dying.
Now, I wouldn't suggest for one moment that the abortion industry wants Kermit Gosnells to exist. This is not a question of anyone's motivation except Gosnell's. Because there are bad actors out there. And that's why you have rules and regulations. There are bad actors. And then there are also bad actors in the bureaucracy who choose to turn and look the other way. And that happened as well. And so when you're dealing with questions of life and death and health, you have to have a stronger look at these things because the consequences are so grave. It's one thing if people dislike a stop sign and run it on a regular basis. It's another thing if they run past all the rules in an abortion clinic.
Yeah, these are these can be dangerous procedures. I mean, we obviously would make the case it's dangerous 100% of the time for the child in the womb, but it's dangerous for these women as well.
And it's only accelerated with the pills. It's not gone the other direction, because this is the other thing that they're trying to hide the facts on, is now that 60% of procedures are being done by pills, and now that there are some doctors in the state of New York that are trying to export pills to states like Texas by making prescriptions across state lines and sending drugs which are lethal to the child and potentially lethal to the woman if not conducted correctly. If circumstances happen, then when somebody dies, the abortion industry turns around and tries to blame the pro-life community for the drugs that the abortion community is in bed with the drug manufacturer.
And that's the thing. We sat with someone recently who does work with pro-life women's clinics, and they said when they see women who come through their clinic that have had an abortion previously, whether it be medically or via the pills, those women talk about the fact they didn't really know what to expect, especially when they took the pills. No one was honest with them about what's going to happen to their body as well as the body that is inside of them. There's no transparency and honesty there, and that's why we release publications such as this, because we want folks to be educated, especially when you're making decisions like that.
But Gosnell is an excellent representation. It's a story that's tragic beyond imagination. It's horrible, and I understand why no one would want to look into it or look at it. But it can't be forgotten because it did happen.
Right. There's a documentary that came out. There's 3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy.
3801 Lancaster, American Tragedy. That was the address of his clinic.
Yeah. So if people want to look into that, just look into that. It's a documentary.
It's worthwhile. Not for small children. Please understand. No. I mean, this is a history, and it's a tragic history.
Yeah, it's rough.
But it's a relevant history. And you know that a relevant history. What's interesting is in this entire post-Dobbs debate, I have not found any other source of media that is willing to bring Gosnell into the conversation. Everyone runs away from it. Goes right back to the Associated Press. Why won't they talk about it? But they'll talk about this.
Well, in a few years ago when we had to watch the documentary on Gosnell as part of a work assignment as well as Unplanned, the movie that was about the life of Abby Johnson, I remember watching the documentary, the Gosnell piece, at home and just having to pause it. I watched it by myself, middle of the day. Had to pause it a few times and just walk around the house. And quite frankly, I was walking around the house praying because it's not easy to watch, but I feel like it's important that we know and understand because that's the fight that we're in. That's the reality.
All right, let's take a look now at the other piece of this. As we were putting together the See the Language campaign in 2023, and the Ohio language was an interesting experiment. Now, in 2024, the abortion industry came out with 10 different proposals out in the states, and each of them was sort of had a piece of the puzzle of their agenda. Like they didn't go for the same thing in Colorado that they went for in Florida. And across the states, they would take different pieces because they're trying to get their whole agenda into law somewhere. Because if they can get it into state law somewhere, they can get it into state law everywhere. Because way back in the back part of their strategy is they can use the federal court system to once again uniform, make everything uniform. They believe they've got a second shot at a Roe v. Wade reality. If they can stack the court, if they can get the court in their favor, that you can basically say what's eligible. In other words, if New York has the most liberal law in the world in the country, why shouldn't every state have that law? Well, if they can marry the provisions of what's going on in Ohio or New York to the concept of the civil rights of a woman, then they can make it a federal issue. All of this is directed to bring us back to a second Roe versus Wade, where all state laws are wiped out again, and only one theory prevails over everything, and that's the one that the abortion industry wants. Now, this is an industry that wants constitutional entitlement to practice what they do. So all the stuff about rights is all squalor in this sense. They don't care about rights. They care about access and power. They want their industry to survive. And by making their industry a part of constitutional thought and adjudication in lawsuits across the country, they now have superpowers. That's what they're about.
I hate to break in right there, but we do need to take a break, and we'll come back on this important point in a moment here on The Public Square, today featuring Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan. Once again, that report, Just the Facts, are available. Abortion in America is its title. It's available at aproundtable.org.
We will be right back for more on The Public Square.
We left this roundtable discussion on the public square on a very important note just a few moments ago, so let's pick it right up where we left off. And once again, here is Dave Zanotti.
Disclaimer, it's automatic to the Dean of the Temple University Law School, Rachel Rebochet. And if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly, I beg your indulgence. We looked it up on pronunciations in many ways, and Rebochet is pretty close. Rachel Rebochet, who is the Dean of the Temple University Beasley School of Law. You are welcome on this program at any time. You're welcome to write to us, to communicate with us, to correct us, to defend your position, to attack ours. We would be happy and thrilled for the dialogue.
We used to have a college professor that would write us all the time and lecture us and talk to us way back in the day. So, we have some folks listening that disagree, and we'd love to have those conversations.
We would be happy. And this is not about her as an individual personally whatsoever. But I've got to tell you, she's created some new space in the American world of law. She is now an abortion scholar. Could you imagine 30 years ago if I had said to you there are going to be people who are going to define themselves as lawyers, as specialists in abortion law?
Yeah, I actually might believe that. Yeah.
I'm going to go to school to study this. I'm going to go to law school to study this. I'm going to create a practice in a field in this. This is her practice.
I would argue that you are an abortion scholar.
Yeah. I think you could be pro-life and be an abortion scholar. Yeah. You could have that understanding of how negative that impact is on society as a whole. I'm just thinking of some other things, like people would call themselves an expert in climate change or things of that nature and put it under the same thing. And I'm like, well, there's people that are experts in that can prove that it isn't the way that the others say it is. So,
well, this is the brain trust from whence the defense of all of this is coming from. Now, I'm sure that she's not alone. But, when we were doing See the Language, one of the things that we were trying to do in 23 was to find the source of where this language was coming from. And we asked lawyers all over the country. We asked lawmakers all over the country. We asked members of the judiciary, can anyone track the source? Where's the author of this? We have nothing to hide. We say our whole goal on See the Language is turn the spotlight on. Here's everything we've seen and here's our sources. We then follow up a year later with Abortion in America. And here's all the sources and the citations. It's all from the abortion industry. Why aren't they willing to come forward and say, I wrote that law, I wrote that proposal? They've never been willing to do that. But now it's almost like somehow something's pushing them out. I don't know that we'll ever see another quote at this standing from Rachel Rebochet.
Well, I also find it interesting the way that they quote her in this. They really only give her one little quote.
Well, read that, would you?
Yeah, well, they do a whole paragraph saying what she said, and then they give her an actual quote. Her actual quote says, "The tension we find ourselves in is patient privacy," she said, but also the looming allegation that exceptions are being misused.
Hang on, let me get that's Rachel Rebochet, Dean of the Temple University Beasley School of Law and an abortion law scholar, said, "States don't need to know personal information, such as the name and address of people who receive abortions."
Which, who's asking for that? We just said nobody wants to know the name.
Let's go back to the question you raised about Gosnell. What other medical practice are you saying that you could perform that the person could be totally anonymous when it's a process that's regulated in state healthcare policy? So if something went wrong, if there was a recall on a medication or a technique or an application or anything, you're not allowed to know who the person was? I mean, HIPAA already protects the privacy from people who don't need to know, not knowing.
Right.
But so that's the lead, though. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking, I've gotten 3 calls on my cell phone in the past 2 months from retailers letting me know about food recalls because they know everything that we buy. They have all of that information. Now, that's not public information, but no one's asking for this abortion name and address to be public.
They are going to say that I think they would say they're afraid that people are going to prosecute women that have had abortions. That's the fear, right?
Okay, let's take a second and test that out. And a person lives in state X, and all access to abortion they can get in state X is what's provided by law. So if it's in New York, it's in Ohio, it's anything you want. And if you're in Texas or Alabama, not so much so. In no state is abortion 100% banned. All right? So, but if you're going into a state procedure, in the state, you can only get what's legal. You can't get what's not legal. If you go out of state, you're permitted to go out of state and get that procedure, and you can't be prosecuted back in your state. First off, there'd be no record in your state that you went out of state. And if it's a record in somebody else's state and your state went to get that and try to prosecute you, they couldn't prosecute you because it's legal in the state in which the transaction and the procedure occurred. The notion behind that from purposes of law is completely ridiculous.
Yeah. Can I use a example that would be real life? And
Yeah.
prostitution's legal in Nevada. There are plenty of men that cross state lines and go and do that. No one's ever been prosecuted in their home state for going and doing that there. Not advocating for it, I'm not saying, but that's a perfect example of something you can do.
You could do the same thing with marijuana.
Yeah, in a number of states you could do that
You
with
could do
marijuana.
the same thing with gambling, where there are different stratifications of legality. So the notion of that is bizarre and absurd. Furthermore, there's absolutely no history of women being prosecuted in this country.
Yeah. I'm not aware of pro-life organizations that have ever called for such a thing.
No.
No one's ever.
So again, there's the carnival show. All right, and the distraction. Let's go back here. Rachel Rebouchet, Dean of Temple University and an abortion law scholar, says states don't need to know personal information, such as the name and address of people who receive abortions. And while it's useful to report basic information about abortion, she said there are risks for abortion rights advocates, particularly in the reports from states which ban where the data mostly shows how often abortions are provided through exceptions. Let me restate that. There are risks for abortion rights advocates, particularly in the reports from states with bans, where the data mostly shows how often abortions are provided through exceptions. Let's deconstruct that. Let's say a state has, at any level of a ban, with the exceptions of rape, incest, life and health of the mother. That language is dominant in the states. There are exceptions in virtually every state. Okay. Now, how would you, this is really critical. This is like the checkers of how this game or how this board situation works. It's not a game, but it's a strategy situation. How would you know? Someone comes forward and they receive a procedure, and because the state says, unless it's this, or this, it's not legal here. And they say, well, it's this. It's rape, it's incest, it's life of the mother, it's health of the mother. Okay, that's fine. That's what they say. The procedure goes forward. It's all according to law. What Rachel is saying is what Professor Rachel is saying is, we don't want that information. We don't want anyone to know that because why? The law says if that's the case, then in its case, why don't you want people to know that?
I think she's saying there's going to be a fight over whether or not the person met the exemption. They're going to have to prove it. There's going to be fighting about, were you a little bit over the line? Oh, you got it it's a ban at 12 weeks or whatever it is. Oh, but you got it at 13 weeks. Or she's afraid that they're going to nitpick the person and then prosecute them for breaking the law.
Well, I think a couple other things come into play. I think when we talk about rape, incest, and life of the mother, I think if there is that accusation of rape, then listen, we need to get a rapist off the streets. We need to find out who committed the rape, and we need to go prosecute that person to the fullest extent of the law, not the woman that was the victim.
Sure.
So I think that's number one. Number two, I also think that when you look at the data and the numbers, as we do in abortion in America, that rape, incest, and life of the mother are such a small percentage of the abortions that are done. I don't think she wants that data being out there. That's why she says, exceptions are being misused. She thinks they're being misused by pro-life people saying, look how small of a number this is. Those are the exceptions. That's what she doesn't want out there.
You guys are in the shoes now of where they're at. What they're saying is we've got a hole in our logic, because while the carnival's over here saying, look at the exceptions, look at the exceptions, look at the exceptions, they made this entire case in 2023 in Ohio based on one exception, one commercial. They spent millions of dollars on one story, and the story wasn't true. Yes, the woman had a tragic and fatal pregnancy that had to be terminated. Yes, she got the procedure, but it's not true that it was a deficiency in Ohio law that drove her out of state, across state lines. It wasn't true. They made it up, and no one, including the Associated Press, was willing to print the facts, because if the facts had come out, their whole campaign would have fell to the ground, because they have used the exceptions as leverage, and now they're afraid the facts are onto them.
Wow, an important and revealing discussion today on the Public Square. That report we've published called Abortion in America is available, just the facts, at aproundtable.org. It's available online and in print form, so why not get a copy and even share it with others? Abortion in America. Some of you have to leave us now. If that's the case for your radio station, please join us online for the So What segment coming up on the Public Square. As you've listened to Dave Zanotti and Rob Walgate and Alan C. Duncan today, perhaps you're asking yourself the question, so what? Well, that's what we deal with here in the final few moments of this program. So stick with us now as we conclude today. Once again, here's Dave Zanotti.
The other day I was talking to somebody, and they were in absolute despair because their state had passed a very liberal piece of language regarding abortion in their Constitution. And they acted as if that was all over. And I said, what do you mean it's over? This fight's just begun. We're not even in the third round of this battle. Combination of several conversations, we came to this conclusion. It's over when you stop fighting. Because some of this language is so bizarre and so dysfunctional that it can't possibly be maintained in real practice. It's kind of like you could say that about the way some teams play baseball. You know, there are some teams, particularly in the realm of softball, that are always looking for a little advantage. So they're real quick to kick the batter's box chalk as far off the field as they can. Well, this is exactly what the abortion industry is realizing, that these regulations, even though the abortion industry is what they're running now, about 11 versus 3, they got it right on state ballot issues, but they realize that if people are going to continue to examine the facts and ask serious questions, they're not going to be able to get away with what they want to get away with. Particularly if people begin to understand that the exception laws, rape, incest, life of the mother, fetal abnormalities, all those things, which are all legitimate and all must be dealt with, can be flexed to mean anything. So that a state that has a, quote, ban on abortion. Now look in this magazine and you will find in Abortion in America that a ban on abortion often, even the most restrictive ban, still permits 90% of abortions when you get into the fine points. They want to kick the dust out or kick the chalk out so that those 10% aren't investigated. That's why they want the records to disappear. Can you imagine any other industry coming to state government and saying, we don't want any records on our activity. We don't want any filings on our activities.
You'd be like, why?
Okay.
So what are you planning to do?
Are magic glasses next? I mean, what is it? Wave a wand? What do you got next?
Yeah, that's like you walk into your kid's room and they close the computer really fast or something. He's like, why? What's going on?
Yeah.
You know, anybody that doesn't want you to see what they're doing is probably doing something wrong or wants to.
Especially when we go back to Professor Rachel's quotes. And you look at, she can't give the examples of where things have been misused, where the data that has been misused. they're just talking about speculation of how it could be misused, and it's illegal to misuse it in that way anyway. So yeah, they have something to hide.
The strategy of the abortion industry is to basically shame their opponents, to harass their opponents, to beat down their opponents, to elevate the abortion industry as some kind of sacramental entitlement that is a derivative of a human right, and that anyone who opposes it is somehow a draconian, anti-female, anti-woman, anti-liberty. I mean, everything is built in the extremity of pejoratives. Abortion is real, and abortion medically, in some cases, is necessary and essential to save the life of the mother. It has always been that way in this country, and abortion is not going to go away because of a book or a law. Abortion is always going to be with us. The question is, who is willing to tell the whole truth?
And how do you think science will continue to impact this issue? Because I've always believed that had we had the science today, back in 1973, the science of the day today, thinking about the ultrasounds and the pictures that we see inside the womb, I just find it hard to believe that decision would have been made in 73.
All right, now that in and of itself is a whole other program. Because I think in 1973, that holds true. I think today it doesn't. Today, science has become anti-science.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Today, we're at the point where the moral devolution of the American spirit is so dramatic that people know, the statistics, the research show that even the women who are having the abortions, they know it's a child. They know that this child left in the womb will become a real baby, human born, that it is a life. It is a human life. It is a baby. They don't even object any longer to using the word baby when they're talking about the unborn child. They don't care. They've been persuaded morally that it is okay to extinguish a life because it is their choice to do so. It is exclusively their choice.
Well, it's sad to see this happening, but to me, this sounds like we're devolving.
Yeah.
You know, we're going back. This sounds more like ancient paganism.
Yeah.
Ancient Rome. Christians were the people that came on the scene, and there would be a baby that was discarded because it had some sort of abnormality or something. And Christians would come and take that child and raise that child and save its life. So there's always been this human ethic that just doesn't value other human life, considers it less than. But we thought we had moved past that. We've come through a time where we've reflected on Christ coming to earth. When Christ came to earth, and then he taught respect for all human life. In the Jewish tradition of people are created in the image of God. And he said things like, let the little children come unto me. If you cause a little child to stumble, it would be better if a millstone were hung around your neck, you'd be cast into the depths of the sea. I mean, that's peaceful Jesus. That's one of the most violent images I've ever even heard of. But that's how much he cares about children. Now, to get back to ancient Roman paganism, you have to step over Jesus. You have to go around Jesus to get back to it. And I think that's a very dangerous place that our culture is in right now.
The diminishment of the value of life is not contained inside one industrial complex. It begins to pervade in every other area and across the entire spectrum of life. This has been the concern of this debate going back to 73, and it is dominant today. Because if you can categorize the question of whether the state, which means whether everybody else in the community has any vested interest in the preservation of innocent life, and say, no, you don't. It is exclusively the right of this party. Then what does that mean when you come to end-of-life decisions?
Oh, yeah.
And who will decide there? Then there's the other piece that we didn't have in 73 that we do have today, and it's how this book, Abortion in America, closes, which is the greater question of the depopulation of the world, and in particular, the depopulation of the United States, which is happening right now. And if they erase the records so states don't keep them anymore and they try to make the facts go away, then as the population continues to disintegrate in America and our social security net, our systems continue to collapse, and the abortion industry is still trying to drain dollars from state and federal budgets to kill more unborn children, which is actually depleting where we are as a country, They don't want that chalk in the batter's box. They don't want people to say to them, what part of this problem do you own? Because you've diminished the entire quality of life. They just don't want the facts.
Well, and this book becomes even more important. If states stop reporting the data,
this may be the last time that there is a publication built upon the records of what was available only through the abortion industry's data.
That becomes a historic document, a snapshot in time.
Yeah.
So I would
and something they can't attack.
They just have to hide from it.
And say, it's old data, we don't, it doesn't matter anymore. Well, where's the new data? Well, we don't keep it anymore. Well, how come? Because we say so.
Boom. So get the book.
Yeah, get the book. So should we despair? Should we give up? Should we say, well, they've won and it's over?
No, they're on the run.
They're on the run. They're running away from the truth. Now, the answer isn't just to somehow beat them by passing laws. Laws play a role in this. But in addition to that, if we can change the approach to understanding that there is a large community in America that will do whatever it takes to help women get through the 9 months of pregnancy to save the life of that child, whether the mom chooses to raise the child or bring the child out to adoption, whatever those options would be, that there are people that will help for that transitory 9-month period, that another human life could be born that is vital to God. That is, I will tell you, I know people who have done this, and I know people who have not. And I can tell you that adoption works.
Yes, amen to that, Dave. Thank you. And thank you for listening to The Public Square. Hey, thanks for your support as we begin a new year of The Public Square. And thanks for listening.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.